Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to this edition of Recount Update. On this very special day in Guyana's history, it is, of course, our 54th independence anniversary. And I'd like to also take this opportunity to welcome my guest, Mr. Charles Ramson Jr., attorney at law and candidate of the People's Progressive Party, Civic. Charles, welcome to today's program.
Thank you, Gordon. It's a pleasure to be here, and happy anniversary to everyone.
So it's quite a significant day. We're observing our 54th independence anniversary at a time where, at a very perilous time, for want of a better word, where we are in a serious situation from the national perspective as it relates to a deliberate attempt to rig and compromise our elections, which was held on March 2nd. I want to begin by you reflecting on what has been going on in Guyana. Of course, COVID-19, elections recount in the context of our 54th independence anniversary.
Well, yeah, when we gained our independence in 1966, it's significant because it allows us to be able to have what we call self-determination. Being able in the process to determine your own path and make the mistakes yourselves, as opposed to anyone who are not really from here or are colonizers to do that. However, making those mistakes doesn't give you a license to repeat your mistake. And during the period of time since we had our independence in 1966 and under the 28-year rule, consecutive year rule by the PNC, they were able to gain power and remain in power as a result of rigged elections. And what was the consequence of them remaining in power as a result of rigged elections is that Guyana moved from being one of the most prosperous countries in the region to becoming the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Fast forward to today, because since 1992, we've had free and fair elections, and we've had a legitimate government as a result of that. Fast forward is that Guyana became the fastest growing economy in the entire region and in the entire Latin America. And it was the only country to have 9 consecutive years of economic growth. And this was during the biggest downturn that the world has ever seen prior to the global depression in around the 1940s. So you fast forward to today, to 2020, and you see that the APNU AFC, and in particular the PNC, which leads that party, they have not learned their lesson, and they want to repeat the mistake of the past. And that is, in particular, is rigging elections. We should not be having this discussion today because we have seen the benefits of having a democracy. And a lot of us in this country, we like living in a democracy. We like being able to have an opinion and to be able to have a say in what goes on in our country and who gets to represent us. And when you enter into the realm of rigging elections, which is what the PNC is trying to do at the moment, the APNU AFC is trying to do at the moment, with the assistance of a few individuals within GCOM, they're trying to return us to those years of undemocratic rule. And the result inevitably will be the impoverishment of our country and the removal of rights and freedoms that goes along with that. And that's why it is very important that the People's Progressive Party and every single Guyanese person who believes in democracy, we take a stand and remain resolute so that we continue to fight for our democracy.
I want to piggyback on something you said, Charles, and this relates to your comment relating to repeating the mistakes, and you were referring specifically to rigged elections. I would hasten to say it is more than just an attempt to repeat the same mistakes, and I would go far back as 2015. We've already seen the PNC-led APNU AFC coalition repeating the same mistakes of pre-1992 from the perspective of economic mismanagement and a paucity of vision as it relates to the economic development of Guyana. However, still on the issue of the 54th independence anniversary, we would have seen the international community continue to call out the government, well, the Granger, the remnant of the David Granger administration in relation to respecting the will of the people. Most recently, we saw a statement from the U.S. State Department, more specifically, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, calling on David Granger and his, as I said, what remains of his government to respect the will of the people. Charles?
Well, there's a reason for that. Is that number one, we live in a far more interconnected world. That's one. Number two, there is increased security threats that exist in this region. And as a result of that, it is important that countries do not go rogue. And the best way that you can find that countries end up over the long term with the leaders that they desire and choosing a path that is the right path that gives them the correct pathway to prosperity is by being able to have that democratic will represented by voting. And look, David Granger and a lot of the leaders in the APNUAFC, Harman and Basil Williams, Paul DeLawrence, a number of them would like to see themselves sworn in on the fraudulent declaration from Claremont Mingo. But the good news is that the story about his fraud and his fraudulent declaration is not a PPP story. It's a story that was witnessed that by everyone that was present, all of the international observers, all of the local observers, friends of the PPP, non-friends of the PPP political parties that weren't friendly towards the PPP during the campaign, a number of, in fact, every single party had witnessed, every single observer witnessed that the tabulation and the declaration for Region 4 was fraudulent. And in fact, they've made those statements. And that's one of the reasons why you would find that they had taken an early stance so that is not the basis upon which any government is sworn in. In fact, one of the things that you would remember they said is they told David Granger, do not swear in on these fraudulent results.
Okay, let's home in our discussion specifically on the ongoing recount at the Artichoke Conference Center. Of course, after day 20, we would have seen 1,206, a total of 1,206 boxes counted in 20 days. Of course, yesterday we saw 82 boxes counted. The slothfulness of the process continues, and even more worryingly is the deliberate, even slower process of the counting of Region 4 votes. One would recall during the tabulation following March 2nd, and historically in 2015 and before, there's always some effort by some within the Guyana Elections Commission to delay the count of Region 4. And more specifically, it's more obvious now during this recount that there is a deliberate effort to slow down the count of Region 4. However, already, I would say it's too late. What has been counted so far in Region 4 have already brought to the fore some very startling revelations. Your take on this?
Yeah, what I find really interesting, especially coming from the statement made by the APNU leaders, and in particular yesterday, more recently, Joseph Harman, is that number one, they have impugned the credibility of the election. They've sought to impugn the credibility of the election. But then at the same time, quite perversely and obtusely, they have sought as well to claim victory over the election as well. This, of course, does not make any sense whatsoever. You can either claim that you won the election or that you can claim that the election wasn't valid. You
It's
can't do.
it's called covering all bases, in my view. If you win, it's good. If you don't win, it's bad.
You can't do both at the same time. But then I mean, most people that know when they end up in a dispute in, let's say, a race or playing some kind of sport, most people will say the loser would want to say, let's do it over again. And that's why you hear them calling for fresh elections. But I would like to let them know that I support fresh elections, but in 5 years from now, after a PPP government is sworn in, because we would have, when the recount is concluded, it would have seen that the PPP would have won this election. So I support fresh elections, but after Dr. Irfan Ali is sworn in as president, and after his government would have had 5 years in power. We are not going to be bullied by the APNU, AFC at any point in time. You would have heard the general secretary of our party say something the other day, which is that they should have learned by now that this is not a political party that could be bullied. They are laboring under a false misapprehension that this is a weak party. We are not a weak party. We are the strongest political party in this region, and we have fought off undemocratic rule, and we are going to continue to remain a country that preserves the will of the people.
Okay, if I could just take it to what's happening next door to in Suriname and juxtapose the Suriname situation against the Guyana embarrassment. I'm not going to call it a situation. Suriname, of course, elections held yesterday, winner declared, president to be sworn in within a week, in the middle of COVID-19. And of course, observers rejected by Guyana are currently observing the elections in Guyana. I'm going to call it out. I'm going to call it for what it is. How much more silly can it get?
It's a national disgrace that we are even forced to get to this point, to have to do a recount when what GCOM at the beginning should have stepped in to say that it is clear that Claremont Mingo should have been reading from the SOPs, that the PPP didn't have to take him to court to do something he was required to do by law, that even there was no reason whatsoever to move the tabulation of the result from Ashman's building to the Kingston office, where they put the spreadsheet up on a bed sheet where no one can see the remainder of the tabulation being done. And then on top of that, the government's involvement in hiding Claremont Mingo so that he is not served with a letter requesting a recount, the total closing down of the Ashman's building on not one, but 2 occasions, and forcing parties and members of the party and observers out of the Ashman's building. It is a national disgrace and an international embarrassment for us to be in this situation. And it's all because the AP and UAFC wanted to rig the election. And I tell people all the time, Michael, that we heard long before that there were a couple individuals and one particular person within GCOM who was planning to rig the election. And that was one of the reasons why we were hot on their tracks from the moment that they started to produce this fake spreadsheet with numbers that they got from nowhere. But the good news is that the recount is showing that the SOPs published by the People's Progressive Party since as early as the Thursday, that would have been the 4th, the 5th, since as early as the 5th of March, the People's Progressive Party would have published our statements of poll for Region 4, and all of the statements of recount are matching the statements of poll that we published. So which means that, and that's for Region 4, which means that when Region 4 is finished, you will see that our announced result is that the People's Progressive Party won, and we won by a large margin of about 16,000 votes. What they do not know is that the votes that they would have stolen from us in the fraudulent declaration, we've already recovered that in the recount. So they have no way of being able to obtain a larger margin of votes than the People's Progressive Party
in a full system
as it is right now. So even what I said yesterday was that the recount will prove to the world that the APNU AFC have lied when they said that their SPs showed that they won the election. And Michael, you know, there are many times in life that you lie. And there are many times in life that sometimes that people lie to themselves. But there's sometimes in life that no matter how much you lie, you're never going to be able to be saved.
All right, I'm bringing us back to our 54th Independence and anniversary observances. And you would have seen and in the context of our anniversary observances, you would have seen President-in-Waiting, Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, outline immediate, midterm, and future plans for Guyana as it is in the context of our recent economic decline, and also in the context of COVID-19. There are discussions, and of course our time is almost gone. There are discussions, however, and I've heard it, I've read it, and I've listened to utterances by the COVID-19 task force, of course, politically laced task force, in relation to consideration to a possible complete lockdown. I shudder to think that this would be a consideration in the context of the plight of the Guyanese people, and I would want to say a significant portion of the Guyanese people affected by COVID-19 and would be negatively and perhaps, okay, I'm not going to use the word I'm thinking, but negatively impacted by a complete shutdown are supporters of the APNU AFC. Dr. Ali has been continually outlining plans for the people of Guyana, irrespective of whoever you voted for. Dr. Ali was elected president of Guyana on March 2nd, and his intention, he has stated repeatedly, that his intention is to govern for all the people of Guyana. But we continue to outline our plans in the context of what has been happening, immediate term, midterm, and long term.
So, first of all, I've been very impressed by what President-elect Dr. Irfan Ali has been doing, because he's doing exactly what a true leader is supposed to be doing, a man who knows that he's won the election, which is that he has shifted his focus onto how is he going to be able to rescue Guyana from where we are at the moment. Because at the moment, it is a crisis, right? It's a constitutional crisis, it's a health crisis, and he's got to be able to lead the effort to rescue Guyana out of that crisis. So I've been very impressed with the way that he has shifted his focus from just focusing on the recount, which is important for us, and they've got a number of strong, competent people leading our efforts on the recount, but he's already thinking about the future, and the future and what has to be done immediately and also in the medium term. And a lot of those plans will see every single Guyanese benefiting as a result. And I tell people all the time that the number one thing that we can do to help with the COVID-19 situation is to elect a legitimate government and to get over this recount as quickly as possible, so that we could have a legitimate government in place, because there's a lot of funding that's available for us to be able to tap into once we're able to get our legitimate government in place. And just to be clear what that means, a legitimate government can only come from the recount coming to its conclusion. Suriname has proven that the lockdown, if a lockdown happens, it would be politically motivated And it would prove also that the APNU-AFC would have lost the election, because they would be trying to say, let's not conclude the recount. Because if they had won the election, they would be hurrying up to conclude this recount. In fact, they would have already sworn in if they had really won the election. And nobody would be telling them not to swear in. So if there is a lockdown, it would be politically motivated. Our numbers for Corona do not justify the lockdown of the country. You've got 100 persons who are tested positive, and you've got about 11 persons who would have died from Corona, some of whom have complications. So it doesn't justify any kind of serious numbers for us to take those type of extreme measures. And think about it this way, that when they were hoping that, or they were expecting that so many persons would be affected, and they tried to take over the Ocean View Hotel, Corona is likely to end before they complete working on the Ocean View Hotel.
Point of correction, Corona is likely to end before the fence of the Ocean View Hotel is completed.
Right. So, but what I find amazing is that in Joseph Harmon's presentation yesterday, his statement yesterday, at no point in time was he ever concerned about the fraud from Claremont Mingo. In fact, the APNU-AFC leaders, they are seeking right now to exonerate Claremont Mingo. At no point in time have they mentioned Claremont Mingo as being involved in fraud, even though he's the only one who would have submitted a fraudulent declaration, because all of the other declarations so far are matching the original declarations. So none of them have ever sought to want to investigate Claremont Mingo, and they know why. They know why, because he was acting on their instruction. The APNU, and in particular Congress Place, their leaders, they were in cahoots with Claremont Mingo and another person within the GCOM, and the intention was so that they can rig the election. So instead of saying that Claremont Mingo should be investigated, this is what they've decided to do, Michael. They have decided to place the responsibility of fraud in this election on the 12,000 persons who were election day staff. And if you were to add the 5,000 other persons who were political party representatives inside the polling stations, that's 17,000 persons. They are hoping that Guyanese believe that 17,000 persons participated in a grand scheme of colluding and conspiring to rig the election so that we can get the APNU-AFC back into power. That is the idiocy that is coming out of the APNU-AFC. But given their track record over the last 5 years, no level of idiocy surprises me coming out of the APNU-AFC. All that is left for them to do is to claim that they have won an incredible election. And just so that you get a clear idea of what 17,000 persons they're claiming colluded to rig this election looks like, you would have to fill the Guyana National Stadium to its capacity. And that would be the
number of voters,
the number of persons that would have to be involved in this grand conspiracy to rig the elections, as opposed to just about 3 or 4 persons within GCOM.
Thank you, Charles. On this note, we'll have to bring today's recount. Well, we'll have to bring today's recount to an end. Join my colleague Todd at 4 p.m. for another update, and I'll be back with you at 8 p.m. So far, 1,206 boxes counted, and 1,000 at the end of yesterday, day 20, 1,133 boxes remain. Thanks for joining us, PPP candidate Attorney General Charles Ramson. I'm your host, Michael Gordon. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much. All the best.